Hey everyone, my name is Amber, and I put together this 1 minute Feaso that you can use to vet potential development projects basically in under 1 minute. And it has all the features that you need. And once you understand what needs to be done or what you really need to put in, you'll be able to do this in less than a minute. So let's get into it. So let me just quickly explain that to you. First off, this actually works for both Australia and the rest of the world because I think in Australia and UK we've got GST and VAT, and in US we don't really need that. So if you change that to NA, which stands for not applicable, and you change that value to zero, you don't really need to do much. It basically becomes a version that you can use internationally no matter where you are. You'll be able to give it a spin. There's a free trial available, and once you know what's going on in here, you'll see that this is one of the most used tool in my arsenal, so to speak. So it's it helps you really. It's like a back of envelope feasibility, but it's actually a little bit more detailed so that it gives you some accurate estimation and answers. And it includes sensitivity analysis. So if you look at this section here, we've got sensitivity analysis. We've got this section over here, which basically talks about, what are you buying the land for, what are we going to build it for, what are we going to build on it. And then we've got this section here, which talks about everything per unit. So if you're building 4 townhouses, 4 apartments, 20 apartments, 50 apartments, or whatever, this is one for each individual unit. And this is for the total project. Then when it comes to funding, you can select your funding table, your funding options. Are you going to go with TDC, which stands for total development costs or total costs for your development? Or are you going to go with GRV, which stands for gross realization value? And there's going to be plenty of videos I'll be putting together on YouTube that'll explain all the different aspects for it that you can understand and go through in your own time while you're actually trying this. So yeah, and it also has a target development margin where you put in a value that's the return that you want to make on all the different costs, and it'll tell you that's what you need to pay for the land. So you don't have to ever get swayed into the hype that, oh, you got to get this project or you got to get this site. Do your maths, do your numbers, and it is so easy to do these numbers. It's not funny. I think one of the biggest feedback that I ever got from all my students was that they find it really hard, especially people who are trying to get into property development or real estate development. They find it super hard to actually do numbers on projects because when you start you have no idea what to put in, and I'll show you how all of this works. But this video is purely showing you how this calculator is going to work. So you can come in, put in your street and everything, and if it's an actual address and you click on Google Maps, it will take you to that address. Let's say the land value here is, all the blue fields that you see, those are basically all your input fields. That is it. You don't really need to input a lot. I put in 1,050,000 and I say nope. So I'm doing one without the GST, so that people from around the world can actually see that this can be used in their country as well. So if you look at land value, you've got 1,050,000 here. This was for GST. So if I change that to GST or to VAT, this will automatically change to that. So that's what you need to do if you are from any other part of the world. If you have stamp duty again is an ad valorem tax. It's levied on the value of the property as a percentage. It could be called something else in your world. If you have a different version, give me some feedback and we can put something together for your country. So we've got legal acquisitions 0.05% and land value per unit. So let's say I'm going to develop 4 townhouses or I'm going to develop 4 units or whatever. So townhouses, apartments, condominiums, flats, whatever you want to call them, basically they are units that you are developing. So let's say in this scenario we are doing 4 units. And the built area for each unit is going to be 160 square meters. So because this is in square meters, I can put in the value of what is actually going to cost me. But here, I've got these two options where when I'm trying to put together costs, either I know a ballpark figure that, you know, in order to build one unit, it costs $250,000, or I can figure out a square meter rate or a square feet rate from the building contractors locally, and if I'm going to build 160 square meters, I should know the square meter rate. So this is my square meter rate. I find out that I can build at, you know, $1,650 a square meter, and that gives me a total cost of the unit as $264,000. So I haven't put in any currencies in here. Some of the ones that are available, they will be ironed out and removed in the actual version, or there'll be an option where you can put in your currency. In you can input your currency somewhere, and it will change the currency for everything else in the add-on. So once I've got all of this, I can come in here. I can say, look, every unit that I'm going to build, on an average, I can sell them for $725,000. And rest everything gets calculated automatically. For construction, you can specify, okay, I'm going to allow 5% contingency on construction. When it comes to consultants, usually they are a percentage of the construction value, and that's where this is. But if it is manual, you can adjust this percentage until you reach the amount that you are after. You can put in those values here, and that will give you the consultant value. So right now I'm allowing about, let's say, 6% or let's say 5% of the construction value, and this will automatically update based on that. Then we've got council contributions. Council contributions, again, in some parts of the world it does apply, in some parts of the world it doesn't apply. So where it does apply is that you basically, if you're developing something, you are actually going to put stress on the infrastructure that's already there. So you pay some sort of an infrastructure levy, or do some sort of a contribution in order to upgrade those that infrastructure, or you pay your council to handle all of that. So in Australia, where I'm from, it's they're called council contributions, and they are basically calculated in most cases on the value of the land. And different councils could have different formulations to do that. If you know what it is, you can find that out and tweak the percentage until you reach the desired value. But in most scenarios here in Melbourne, it's about 5% of the land value. That's what I've allowed there. When it comes to agent's commission, you're going to hire an agent to sell it. Because this is a 1-minute Feaso, although it's taking me longer than a minute to actually explain it to you. But once you understand what needs to go in there, I kid you not, it takes less than a minute to quickly run numbers on any project and figure out whether or not you want to dig deeper on the project, or you want to go further, find out more details, find out more costs, and so on. So if you've got marketing agent commission, you can put that in here. And then there's a lump sum allowance for every unit that you're going to do. So it could be miscellaneous, could be legals, could be marketing costs, could be building permit, could be valuation, could be anything. So if I allow, let's say, $7,000 per unit, for that, it tells me that, okay, I'm making 19.9% development margin on this. Now, this development margin is on the cost. This isn't return on money. So I'll explain what everything is in our other videos. But let's say you've got debt funding, and you know that for construction, you'll be able to borrow 66% or whatever. So you put in 66%, it'll calculate that for TDC and GRV and tell you, okay, as a developer, if you can borrow that amount, you'll be out of pocket, or you'll have to put in the developer contribution or developer's equity of $822,000 in order to cover all the costs and so on. So, and if you select the GRV model, that's what you can do. And you can do that here because finance costs are basically calculated from TDC or GRV and so on. So we've got, below we've got finance option. So let's say you've signed the contract on a site, but you know that you won't be ready to actually build it for another 6 months. So you have a holding period, but you can actually get a different loan, which is a retail loan, in order to just settle on the land as an investment. And when you're ready for construction with all your permits and everything in place, that actually converts into a commercial loan. So there are two options. So you can put in, and usually the LVR, which is the loan to value ratio, or LTV in some parts of the world, if you put in 80%, you can put that here. And you can put in the interest rate, which is usually lower, and the LVR, which is the loan to value ratio, is usually higher in that. So you can put in based on whatever is available in your part of the world, and you can put in total number of periods that you'll be holding the land for before you start construction. So you say, it's going to take me 7 months, before I'm ready for construction. And for your construction finance, because it's a commercial loan, the loan to value ratio will be a little bit lower, and the interest rate could be a little bit higher. So you can put in 6% of what you are going to develop, and you can say, my construction is going to be 12 months, or you could allow 15 months, so 12 plus 3, extra 3, so that you know that after everything is built, there's time in settlements, there's time in all the people who bought off the plan or who are signing all the contracts and everything before your money comes in. So always better to allow a little bit of buffer there. So when you put that in, it gives you all the metrics that you need. It is so easy to use and design, but then again, at the same time, this gives you everything in broad strokes. So, and the reason developers use a tool like this is because doing feasibility costs time and resources. And if you haven't got all the time and resources to go all the way, dig deep basically into every development project, potential project that comes across your table, that's what you need to do, because you need to vet these projects and say, okay, 10 of these don't stack up, but 2 of them do, and I'm going to start looking into more detail on these projects. So that's what you do. So you've got development margin on cost, development margin on revenue, you've got total profit per unit, total profit for the project, you've got your residual value of the land per unit. Yeah, that's another thing that I forgot to mention. You've got a target development margin. What that means is that when you buy a site and you know your numbers, you can say that, look, I want to make at least 15%. I'm going to risk so much to do this project. So I want at least 15% return on the cost, which is basically development margin on cost. So you put that in, that I want to make at least 15%. It'll tell you that you can afford to pay $1,072,000 and still make 52%. So that what that does, it gives you the value of the land, the maximum amount that you should be paying for the land, if all the averages and everything that you put in a ballpark and they are accurate. It'll give you a value that you should be paying for land. So if the seller or the vendor is actually saying, no, I want 1.3 million for my land, you can tell them that it's not worth, because all you can do is put 4 units on them, and if you put 4 units on them, that's all you're going to end up making. So if they're asking for 1.3 million and I put 1.3 million over here, you'll see that I'll start making diddly Scott basically. So developer margin would fall to 4%, which is not going to cut it for me. So I know that this is my maximum limit, and that's all I want to pay. And I'm happy with making 18.8% development margin, because I'm turning that over in almost 2 years. So so we've got this, and it gives you your return on equity, which is based on your developer's contribution. It gives you certain other metrics, and there's a section here, capital raising, which I will discuss in separate videos, and so on. So so this is super easy to use. And let's say you want to even look at, okay, I'll put in all of that, but that is if the market stays where it's supposed to stay. But I want to find out what happens if the market goes up by 5% or moves by 5%, or the sales go up by 5% or go down the scale by 5%, and what happens, and I want to see what happens if my costs go up by 5% or fall down by 5%. So what we've done is I've put together this table where you can look at all of these metrics, all of this sensitivity analysis based on per unit for the project, development margin, what will happen to your development margin. So here the sales are actually going up. So if the sales go up, and whereas the costs also go up by that, you'll see that you'll end up making 15% development margin on cost. And where you'll see that sales fall down, the market falls and slides to less 5%, and costs go up by 5% here, you'll end up making a loss of 3%, which is about 4,870. You can change this sensitivity and say, look, this is 5% is a bit too steep. I want to check that on a 3% scale. So you change that to 3%, and it will go up and go down in 3% and 6% increments and decrement. I don't know if decrements is even a word, but anyway, that's what it is. So it's super easy to use. I would love for you guys to give it a spin and give me some feedback on this. That'll be great. Thanks very much. Hey, I almost signed off, but I forgot to mention that if you're from Australia or New Zealand or UK, where you've got GST or VAT, you can actually select GST, put in the value of 10%. If you're in New Zealand, I think it's about 15%, and it'll do all the calculation based on that. So what it actually does, it gives you the net GST position, which will be used as your net GST liability, but that actually becomes part of your cost of the development. So if you've got whatever value it is, put that in as a percentage, and then you can add GST, and the items that you've got T right next to it are the ones that actually put GST. So if you are actually doing a commercial development and you wanted to do numbers on it, so when you buy commercial property, there's GST applicable on it, so you can select GST here and it'll give you the value over there. But at the same time, if you're in Australia and you selected GST as a percentage here, there's a section here which talks about margin scheme. So once you're claiming GST here, that GST margin scheme needs to be selected as no. Why? Because if you're buying a commercial property, the margin scheme will not apply. And that is why if both these go, if both of these actually become yes, you'll get a check option here telling you that you need to go and change the GST. But that's pretty much it. So I put in a lot of amount of energy and research and all those things in order to put this thing together and make it easier for people starting out to actually use a calculator to quickly figure out what they need to how they need to use this. So how they need to do a feasibility on a potential development project. So give it a spin and see how you go, and I'd love to hear back from you guys. Thanks.